Critical examination of Olivier Knox's article, Trump prepared for tense discussions with Macron, Starmer. Olivier Knox's article in U.S. News Decision Points offers a provocative and critical analysis of President Donald Trump's foreign policy, specifically on Ukraine, NATO, and the geopolitical stability of Europe. The article outlines forthcoming talks involving Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, while predominantly portraying Trump as a disruptive influence in international affairs, which Knox fails to understand, is the reason we voted for Trump. Framing and partiality in the article. Knox's framing is apparent in the initial sentence, where he asserts that Trump has ushered in a new world order. This statement is fraught with implications, indicating a significant departure from previous U.S. foreign policy. It establishes a framework for an essay that characterizes Trump's actions as imprudent and perilous. Throughout the article, Trump is portrayed as subverting conventional relationships, that is what we want, resonating with Russian propaganda. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces under the U.S. leadership blew up a gas pipeline in Germany, and exhibiting greater affinity for authoritarian leaders such as Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping than for U.S. friends, so-called friends, who hate America and free speech. The wording employed is notably evocative. Knox makes it known that Trump is an ally of Putin rather than an autonomous actor acting in what Trump believes to be America's greatest good when he uses phrases like Trump has upended American policy, which we voted for, and his stance on Ukraine could have been written in Moscow. The phrase falsely claims Trump's stance on Ukraine's involvement in the conflict assumes an undisputed reality rather than recognizing the complexity and contentious nature of foreign policy narratives. Knox additionally depicts Trump's administration as antagonistic towards conventional U.S. allies, referencing Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's severe rhetoric directed at Europe. Nevertheless, he offers no specific instances of the statements made, instead, depending on broad assertions. This undermines the case, as it lacks concrete evidence of hostile rhetoric directed at NATO partners. The Ukraine narrative. A unilateral representation. The article's principal assertions focus on Trump's position regarding Ukraine, characterizing it as pro-Russian and detrimental to American interests. Knox suggests that Trump's advocacy for a negotiated peace settlement mirrors a Kremlin-supported agenda. This perspective overlooks the realpolitik of the situation. Trump's pessimism over prolonged U.S. engagement in Ukraine underscores wider apprehensions about military overextension and the fiscal burden on American taxpayers. Numerous conservative leaders contend that Europe, especially Germany and France, need to have a greater responsibility in securing Ukraine instead of perpetually depending on U.S. financial and military assistance. In his farewell speech in 1796, President Washington stated, "The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world." Knox should learn more about history. Our policy should be to avoid permanent alliances with any segment of the foreign world. Furthermore, Knox's claim that Trump denounced Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as a dictator, but refrained from using such terminology for Putin or Xi, is deceptive. Trump's discourse toward global leaders is frequently incendiary and erratic, yet this does not imply an embrace of tyranny. His remarks regarding Zelensky may indicate complaints of corruption and governance challenges in Ukraine. Considering Ukraine's extensive history of oligarchic dominance and corruption controversies, this is a legitimate apprehension. The Russian invasion in 2022 also brought about new difficulties and worsened Ukraine's corruption problems. The surge of overseas assistance and the intricacies of wartime administration fostered the potential for unscrupulous activities. In January 2023, numerous senior officials, including deputy ministers, were implicated in corruption scandals related to military procurement and the misuse of humanitarian funds. These episodes highlighted the persistent challenge of establishing transparent and accountable governance frameworks. Macron's strategy. A desperate endeavor for influence. Knox's analysis of Macron's approach to influence Trump is captivating yet fundamentally conjectural. He references Macron's strategy to exploit Trump's apprehension of appearing weak. However, this presupposes that Trump regards his Ukraine policy as a liability rather than a tactical decision. Knox emphasizes Macron's proposition that Trump's unpredictability might be advantageous against Putin. However, he characterizes this as a desperate aspiration rather than a viable geopolitical strategy. Macron's apprehensions over NATO's stability during Trump's tenure are justifiable. However, Knox neglects to acknowledge that European leaders have historically voiced exasperation with NATO's dependence on the United States for financial support and security provisions. Trump's exhortations for European nations to augment their defense expenditures correspond with prior Republican administrations and certain Democratic detractors of NATO's existing framework. The piece fails to recognize this background. Instead, it depicts NATO as a venerable organization that Trump is jeopardizing recklessly. Starmer's position: a marginalized contributor. The article regards UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as a peripheral character, briefly referencing his Ukraine peace proposal while emphasizing commerce, investment, and security. Knox fails to examine practical alternatives to Trump's approach by neglecting what Starmer's peace plan includes or how it varies from previous suggestions. He underscores Macron's fervent diplomatic endeavors, depicting European leaders as reactive rather than proactive in influencing global occurrences. Starmer's participation exemplifies European apprehension rather than serving as a substantial political counterbalance to Trump's influence. The absence of a thorough study of his plans diminishes the article's depth, concentrating on Macron's challenges instead of offering a comprehensive perspective on transatlantic ties. Absence of diverse viewpoints. The article's most significant flaw is its omission of counter-arguments or viewpoints from Trump's supporters, Republican analysts, or non-establishment foreign policy specialists. Knox characterizes Trump's approach as fundamentally incorrect and unstable, yet fails to examine its underlying rationale. Many Americans support Trump's doubts about NATO, hesitancy to get involved in protracted international battles, and demands that European countries assume greater ownership of their security. Due to the omission of these perspectives, the article resembles an opinion piece rather than a balanced analysis. Final assessment: an anticipable narrative lacking depth. Knox's article aligns with prevalent media narratives that depict Trump as an existential threat to world security. Although it presents valid apprehensions over the future of U.S.-Europe relations under a second Trump presidency, it does so in a markedly political manner and lacks substantial policy analysis. The depiction of Trump as a mere instrument of Putin and a disruptive element inside NATO is reductive and fails to consider the broader context of America's evolving geopolitical policy. A comprehensive analysis would have recognized the critiques and advantages of Trump's strategy, providing insights into the potential of his policies to instigate essential reforms within NATO, facilitate diplomatic advancements in Ukraine, or recalibrate U.S. foreign commitments to better align with American interests. Knox chooses a narrative of urgency and turmoil, emphasizing that his main objective is to depict Trump's foreign policy as imprudent rather than to offer a nuanced evaluation.